Hello nerds! Thank you for watching Generally Nerdy. This is your last Renaissance Nerd video for the month of April. Remember, we did Shepherd Booth's Pie, or Shepherd's Pie, for those of you not versed in the language of Serenity. We're going to be dealing with leftovers in this video. But before we get into it, let's get into the intro real quick. This month we dealt with Shepherd Booth's Pie, or Shepherd's Pie, for everybody who's not familiar with Firefly and or Serenity. But yeah, so Shepherd's Pie, we're dealing with leftovers. When you're done cooking, generally speaking, you have 4 hours to get it from 141 degrees all the way down to 41 degrees. So you have to drop it 100 degrees in 4 hours. Now that might sound like a lot, but it really isn't. It's actually quite simple. And in the restaurant world, at least in the state of Colorado, I feel like it might be a federal thing, but I'm only well versed in Colorado food laws and health code and such. If you can get it from 141 degrees to 72 degrees in 2 hours, then that remaining 30 degrees, you have another 4 hours, so theoretically you could have 6 hours to drop it into a safe zone for eating still, for reheating and so on and so forth. So yeah, the easiest thing to remember though is 4 hours. And that's also 141 degrees. So generally speaking, when we cook, our rough goal for most foods is 165 degrees. So you've got about 20 degrees of play before you start getting into the danger zone. 141 to 41 is the danger zone. So as long as it's here, it's going to be rapidly growing bacteria and very unpleasant things. So just keep that in mind, and that also kind of determines how we cool the food. Since this is basically a casserole, the easiest way, because it's in a dish, is to leave it uncovered in the fridge until it comes down to temperature. Why do we leave it uncovered? Because it cools faster, believe it or not. Also, it creates condensation inside, so it's trapping some of that heat in, so you are more likely to be in the danger zone for a lot longer period of time if there's something covering it. And it doesn't have to be completely uncovered in the fridge. You can put a piece of plastic over it, some food wrap plastic over it, and then just curl up one of the corners. It's totally fine, but you do want to make sure that you have as much surface area exposed as possible. Also, that it's in a cool area. If you need to let it cool down so that you can touch the pan, that's within acceptable limits. That's totally fine, because if it's too hot to touch, odds are it's really too hot to go in the fridge, because you don't want to bring the temperature of the fridge up either. So I mean, it's kind of a lot of stuff to keep in mind, but most of it's basically common sense. So that being said, there was some remainder. I made a little bit more than what I could fit into the casserole dish. So what do we do with that? Well, you put that, again, you want to try and get as much surface area as possible so that you can release as much heat at one time as possible. So I put it in a number of containers. Here we go. I put it in about 3 of these. Notice how this is about as full as I fill this container. So because that way we have multiple containers, we have more surface area so that it cools faster. I did probably 2 or 3 of these containers, like I said. So notice again, this is a little over halfway. You want to make sure that you are cooling fast. Potatoes are super dense, so I mean, I've eaten some at this point. I'm not going to show you the potato container necessarily, but potatoes are super dense, so if I have to do them in containers like that, then I try and do even under half of the container. It's safe practice. It's not 100% necessary because these containers are relatively small. This is a quart container, so really anything in here that's 141 degrees, as long as it's not covered, should cool in about 4 hours in the fridge. But just to be a little safe, I do like to split it up extra. So that's how to cool the food. Now, that's all fine and dandy. Again, since I put it in this container, this is also microwave safe. So you can theoretically use like old sour cream containers. It's something my mom used to use all the time when I was a kid. Be careful when using stuff like that though, because that plastic is not microwave safe. It will leach chemicals into your food. So again, be very, very careful. Also, the corners, generally speaking, down in the bottom here, the corners are not as rounded as these containers are, and I get these things for free. Seriously, a lot of places use these as to-go containers. There's a little the Thai place that's not too far from my house that used to give it, so I have stacks of these things. So if you find a place, there's actually a little Mexican restaurant not too far from here that does the same thing. So if you can find these guys for free, then use them. Again, this is microwave safe. Make sure if you're getting it from a restaurant that you verify with them that the containers are microwave safe. I used to work in a restaurant, and I've worked in a few restaurants, but we used these containers, so I know for a fact they are microwave safe. So when we were cooling the food, we put it in those plastic containers. There are also smaller plastic containers so that you can pre-do some to-go guys. So I didn't do that because I wanted to show you in the video. And so we've got two situations now, right? We've got the casserole dish food, the stuff that was from the casserole dish, and we also have the remaining bits that didn't make it into the casserole dish that haven't been cooked twice. So first, we're going to see the casserole dish food and do that, and then we'll do the leftovers that didn't make it into the casserole dish.
So this is super simple. Just portion your bit into your microwave safe bowl. And these bowls are actually quite amazing. We found them at TJ Maxx, I believe, for like $5, $6. I have one this size, I have one slightly larger, and I have one even larger, and they all have lids. And that's the important part. You see the lid right there. We're going to go over it here in just a second. But it's got a good seal on it, so it works as a storage container as well. It also has a little breather hole so that you can cool things in it, but you can also heat things up. And it has a sort of convection, so as you're heating it up, it holds most of the heat inside and then just allows the pressure to go out through the vent hole. So these microwave bowls are absolutely fabulous. If you can find one, go for it. So yeah, there's the lid there. And just pop that tab open. And it actually, the tab too, you can set a date on it so you know how old the stuff is inside. And then put that in the microwave, all nice and covered like. And you set it for about 3.5 to 4 minutes, and you want to drop your power down to at least 70%. Oftentimes I will do 60%, though if you do drop it to 60, you want to go a little bit longer for 4 to 4.5 minutes. This is just so that it doesn't stay ice cold in the center. If it's in, it's kind of like baking it. The longer it's in there, the more through it's going to get. And then you don't want to microwave it crazy high, because it's going to be scalding hot on the outside and you won't be able to touch it, but the inside again will still be cold. So if you drop the power just a little bit, it's going to cook through the center at about the same time the outside cooks through. And then once it's gone through, you might have to do it for another minute and a half. If you do that, at that point it is perfectly fine to do it at full power.
And now we can do the other leftovers.
So we're going to build a little lunch to-go container. Just like we did with the casserole dish, we're going to do the veggies and meat mix on bottom, about halfway up the side of that container. So veggies and meat. Again, it's very, very similar. We're just doing it on a smaller scale to what we did in the casserole dish. nice and even so that you have a good level field for the potatoes. And then we're going to put our potatoes on top, but just like we did when we built the shepherd's pie in the casserole dish. And this is the last of my potatoes because we were, definitely eating this before I got to filming. So again, you want to level this out. You want it even so that it cooks evenly. Because if you have a thicker side, then that side's going to take longer to cook. And then you just put your cheese on top. And you could, theoretically, because this is all cold, you could just build this and then take it to work or to school or whatever and pop it in the microwave and you'd be good to go. Or if this was cooling, we would not put the cheese in there. We would just build it like that and then put it in the fridge, making sure we had it ventilated. And going into the microwave, we want to ventilate it as well. See, we're leaving it not completely sealed because that'll just build up pressure and then it'll pop the lid off and then it defeats the purpose. But you do want the lid on there. Again, it creates that kind of convection style heat. And then heat it just like we did the last one because it is approximately the same amount of food. And again, you might have to do another minute and a half after the 3.5 to 4 minutes of initial cook time.
And that, guys, is how you can deal with leftovers. And this is really applicable to any casserole style dish. So really, you can once it's cooled to a point that you can touch it, you can start building up those to-goes. You can start building up those lunch dishes right away and let it cool that way, or you can keep the elements separate and then build them cold and do it that way. Either way works so long as you stay within your time limits for hot and cold temperatures. So, that being said, thank you for watching your first month worth of Renaissance Nerd, and I definitely appreciate it. If you liked this episode, please click that thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, click the subscribe button. Don't forget to ring the bell. It'll let you know every time I post a video because sometimes YouTube doesn't do that. Remember, if you are not a patron, then you did not get the full description. There is more to this. For the leftovers videos, probably not so much, but for all of the other videos, there's definitely a lot more to it that I only post on the Patreon. So go to patreon.com/generallynerdy to get all of that information. You can jump on the Patreon for just $1 a month, and that gets you all of the extra information. And there are multiple tiers. And on each tier you get more stuff. Not necessarily more Renaissance Nerd, but other things like books and things. So definitely check it out. Patreon.com/generallynerdy, or the website generallynerdy.net is where you can find all of the social media and a bunch of free stuff and links to the store so you can get your very own generallynerdy.net t-shirt and other things that I do that are hilarious on t-shirt designs and poster designs, and a whole bunch of other stuff is up in the store. So go check that out. Thank you guys for watching one more time. And always remember that if it's generally nerdy and you're hungry, it's probably here.